Hello and welcome to the Meaning Project podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Daniel A. Franz, Dr. Dan, for those of you who appreciate that brevity thing a little more. As always, thank you for this opportunity to allow me to bring a little bit of mental health and meaning to your day. For those of you watching the YouTube video, you can see we're coming at you from a new location today, just outside the Dr. Dan Studios. That's because the Dr. Dan Studios, what you might call my basement, has been taken over by a horde of college students, and they just can't I can't get them to leave. And so that ties into a lot of what we're talking about today. Let me tell you, what a week, what a month, what a year, what a couple of years, right? I think we've talked about that plenty. We're all feeling that a little bit, and don't get me wrong. I mean, what I'm talking about is a lot of positives. My oldest daughter turned 20 this weekend, and that's why we can't seem to get rid of these college kids, and have a lot of good things going on here. But it can be exhausting. And I know, as I talk to many of you, you're feeling that too, and maybe not always in the same positive ways. So that's a little bit of what we'll talk about today, because after episode, I believe this will be 65, the Meaning Project podcast with Dr. Dan is going to need to take a little bit of a break. As I said, this past week has been pretty exhausting. These past few months, for positive things, I get the opportunity to help more people and to do different kinds of work and to continue to reach out to you. But with that, in these next few weeks, my schedule is going to be a little more intense, and I won't be able to record as much. So we're going to take a little bit of a break, just 4 to 6 weeks. And let me tell you, if you find yourself missing the podcast, you can always sign up for the weekly newsletter at danielafranz.com. That's DANIELAFRANZ.com. And even though I won't be podcasting for the next little while, you can still get a little dose of mental health and meaning in your Monday morning email. And I'll share some pieces from Dr. Frankl, as well as other local therapists and some of my own ideas and readings on mental health and meaning and work. And of course, those of you that pay attention to the Dr. Daniel A. Franz Facebook page know that check these out. Look at that. That sweet mug from Sunset Hill Stoneware. This will be the first order, the first run. I think what I'm going to do as we move these on to our listeners, I really like the paint job on this, the glaze job, but they had so many really cool other glazes to go with. Might do a different one. So get your now limited edition, the Meaning Project podcast, Sunset Hill Stoneware ceramic mug on the Patreon page. So, slight blip in the recording there. Hopefully you didn't notice. Hopefully I paused it quickly enough. That was just one more almost college student making their way through my yard to a vehicle to go to parts unknown. Like I said, it may be stressful, but it's so wonderfully positive. I hope you are having experiences like that this summer that you get to share and enjoy with friends and family and loved ones, and maybe even random college students that show up at your house claiming to be your child's friend. But so in some of the other good news, let's see, with that blip, I want to make sure we covered beautiful Sunset Hill ceramic mugs on the Patreon page. Get your merch at the merch store. If you feel you're going to miss the podcast that much, and I hope you do, I really do, you know how much I appreciate you listening. If you find yourself missing the podcast, hop on over to danielafranz.com. Sign up for the weekly newsletter, and I will still be sharing some bits and pieces of wisdom on mental health and meaning in that time while I'm gone. So since we're going to take a little break from the podcast, I thought it would be fun. I hope it's fun. As I thought about the recent weeks in my clinical practice and things that are going, not even recent weeks, quite honestly, some of these have been going on for years. I thought I would highlight, I guess, what I decided to call my personal, meaningful, of course they have to be meaningful, pet peeves in the clinical world. And the first one, I'm going to assume most people, many people, have heard because it has become so prolific. I have heard the words narcissism, narcissist, gaslighting, and everything else associated with that diagnosis for seemingly way too long. And so one of the things I like to joke about now in practice, because I've maybe finally gotten over my frustration and turned it into a bit of a joke, is hey, rather than throwing those words around, let's leave the diagnosing to the professionals. And here's why. I hope that doesn't sound too snarky. When I studied the great big book of diagnostics, and I meant to bring one here to show you, narcissism is pretty much at the top of the hill for diagnosing. One of the most difficult, untreatable, difficult to treat, pervasive, lifelong true mental illnesses. And so when I hear people throwing that word around so flippantly, I mean, personally, as a professional, as a clinician, I won't diagnose narcissism without knowing somebody for at least 6 months of pretty intense treatment. And that's because, first of all, part of the criteria is that it is a pervasive, meaning long-standing pattern. So we have to see patterns of behavior. So a pervasive pattern of maladaptive behavior, of negative behavior. So I can't just meet somebody for 1 day, 1 hour, one intake session, or even a couple sessions and feel like I know them well enough to diagnose a personality disorder. However, I feel like too often people see somebody who they might be frustrated with, who they might feel might be a little overly positive about themselves or have some excess of self-esteem, and they just get angry and throw out the word narcissist. Or maybe they don't appreciate an interaction they've had with them, and therefore it's called gaslighting. Now, I'll be honest, gaslighting, when I first heard that, I thought, what is that? I had to look it up, because that is not part of any diagnosis, any diagnostic criteria, any part of the clinical definition of narcissism. What has happened in the past 10 years, in my opinion, is that as the opportunity for us therapists and psychologists to share ideas, many of my peers will share it in a magazine called Psychology Today. And there are a couple other psychology magazines. And so some people started writing about this big, difficult mental illness because it garners readers, in my opinion. It draws people's attention. So we've taken a very important diagnosis and mental illness, and we've almost simplified it in too easy in a way where too many people are throwing it around, and sometimes in hurtful ways. My understanding of gaslighting is actually a pattern of behavior where you make somebody important to you feel like they're crazy, and that is part of the modern day assumption of narcissism. So here's my point. If you feel somebody is a narcissist, or if you're dealing with that yourself, talk to a professional. And don't allow that professional, this is maybe the other part that will go into some other things. Don't allow that professional to too quickly or too easily diagnose you or the person you're talking about. Sometimes in a couple session, this comes out way too easy. I've heard this before in talking to a client I may be seeing. Their partner is seeing another therapist, and my client comes to me and says, hey, my partner said that their therapist thought I was a narcissist. And I say, my goodness, I've only known you for a month. This other therapist doesn't know you and only knows through your partner's eyes. That seems almost unethical to throw around. So be careful. And I hesitate to even say do the research, because the research out there today is so bad. It's not even research. It is just professionals and pseudo-professionals writing about a very difficult diagnosis. So if you feel like that's something that you struggle with, or you know somebody that struggles with it, let's talk about it. Let's find a qualified professional to talk about it. Not just a professional that will throw things around flippantly and agree with you, but that will challenge your thinking and encourage you to look at it a variety of ways. Which brings me to my next point, right? Okay, so Dr. Dan's first pet peeve, hearing the words narcissism, narcissist, and gaslighting way too much. Here's my pet peeve. This is a long-standing one. Unfortunately, there's just some bad therapists out there. And I hope I'm not one of them. I do a lot to make sure that I'm not. I think, let me tell you this story. Here's how therapists become therapists. We go through 4, maybe 5 years of undergraduate. I did 5 because I really liked college a little too much. And then we go on for 2 years in graduate school, master's of counseling psychology or social work. During those 2 years, we take a lot of classes, and then we go on to do an internship, and then we're done. You get the degree. Afterwards, you have to do, I believe it's several thousand hours of supervised clinical work, and then you can sit for the exam to get your license. The thing is, there aren't a lot of stopgaps in becoming a therapist. You take the courses, you do the internship, you pay the money to the university, and you get your degree. You have as much, I think it's an unlimited amount of opportunities to take the exam. If not, maybe it's 3 or 4, depending on how many you want to pay for. But there aren't a lot of gatekeepers. And in some ways, to me, that makes sense. If you're going to go on and get a master's degree and pay that kind of money, for some schools, it's pretty expensive. They don't want to prevent you from moving on. And then some schools that I have worked with, I actually had this several years ago, they called me up and said, hey, we have a real special case we want you to work with. We're not sure if we want this person to move on and graduate. I thought, now that's interesting. They are acting as an ethical gatekeeper. On the other hand, this person is paying all of this money to get a degree and may or may not be licensable. It really is quite a question. So maybe they're not bad therapists. Maybe they've been through difficult programs or not the best. Most programs are certified under the same certification, but some aren't. But here's how you know if the therapist is right for you. 70 to 80% of successful outcomes in therapy are just being able to have a therapeutic rapport, a good discussion with the other person, with the professional. And if you're out there seeking therapy and you don't feel you have that good connection, it's okay. We as professionals should recognize we can't always help everybody, and it's okay to ask for a referral. If you don't feel that professional is helping you the way you want to be helped, you should be able to have a conversation about it. You should be able to have a fair and equitable and professional exchange so that you can get your needs met and find what will work for you. And so that goes into another thing, the idea that I had this happen actually this week, so it's a little burning in the back of my head, but the idea that therapy doesn't work. Well, point blank, that's just nonsense. Therapy does work. These are tried and true methods for the past 100 years, but even if you go into some of the depths of why they do work, that human connection, that therapeutic rapport, the mentor, the guide relationship, those kinds of things have been working for thousands of years. What doesn't work in therapy is sometimes the wrong theory, the wrong practice applied to the wrong situation, in which you should be able to have a conversation with your professional and say, hey, maybe this doesn't work for me. Maybe I don't want to do it. Or in my experience, an individual who really doesn't want to do the work. And now I've seen that in what we call resistant individuals. Fortunately, I'm so very blessed in that my work is often people that come to me voluntarily. Sometimes. Now, of course, I do have some court-ordered substance abuse work and some substance abuse groups that I do. Those people don't always want to come deal with me. Also, very often, clients may be a little resistant when you have a husband or wife being brought to therapy by their partner because they want to fix the relationship, and maybe that person isn't as interested. That's why therapy wouldn't work. If an individual is resistant or doesn't care or doesn't want to be there, for me personally, professionally, it's kind of fun because I see it as my job, my duty to help them see the benefits here. But it's work. It can be difficult. And that is one situation where therapy wouldn't work. Now, I hate to put the blame, right here I am putting the blame on the person. Well, you come to me because you have issues, but your issue is you don't want it to work. Kind of unfair. But if it's the clinician not working, it's because it's the wrong idea or wrong theory, perhaps the wrong clinician, where you get to have a conversation. If it's a good clinician and a good theory and a good therapy, and as an individual, you come in and say, well, this isn't going to work for me, you're darn right it's not going to work for you. 70 to 80% of successful outcomes come from therapeutic rapport, being able to have a conversation with somebody. But then the other portion of that has to do with just believing it'll work. You can call that the placebo effect if you want, but it really is just belief that this is going to help. As I've said before, Luke Skywalker had his Yoda, Harry Potter had his Dumbledore. These are people that they said they knew this person had something to offer for me. Luke Skywalker running around this swamp with Yoda on his back didn't always believe it was going to work, but it did. And sometimes those trials we go through in therapy, in a mentorship program, are difficult. We're not always sure they're going to work, but they can if we believe in them. All right, so Dr. Dan's pet peeves so far. Things I can work on and help myself with as well as you, right? Narcissism and gaslighting. Leave that diagnostic to the professionals. Bad therapists and claiming that therapy doesn't work. Those are things I love to talk about. Actually, very cool thing. I'm not just going to complain about it being a pet peeve, but I'm doing something about that, working with some people to put together some better training for therapists. That's another thing that you need to know about therapy. We have to do 20 hours of continuing education every year to maintain our license. If you're working with a therapist, you should be able to ask that person, hey, what do you do for continuing education? What do you enjoy studying? What are you learning to be able to help me better? That should be a really cool question. So bad therapist therapy doesn't work. This one is for all of us. And these are, as I talk to you about them, maybe I'll go through my own little therapeutic process here. Related to why the podcast has to break, right? So the ideas of I don't have time, I'll wait till I retire, and I can't afford it. These are almost, we have a list of cognitive behavioral irrational thoughts, right? And I almost see these being, if they're not cognitive behavioral, they're logotherapeutic irrational thoughts, or just Dr. Dan's pet peeves, I don't know. The idea that I don't have time to do this important thing. I think we all know you have time, you make time for what is important to you. You always have enough time. We all only have 24 hours in a day. I've heard this statement before. When God made time, he made enough of it. However you want to look at that, we all get the same amount of time. It's all about priorities. We have different amounts of time to do different things. Most of us, I'm sure the national averages are, a few hours a day on social media, watching TV, Netflix, binging, etc. If you need to exercise, if you want to exercise, you're going to find time to do that. As I went through my kind of mid-year self-analysis, if you remember back in January, I told you my 4 words for the year were balance, discipline, read, and write. And I came to recognize life's been way out of balance the first half of this year for me. I'm putting in a lot of clinical hours. So that's a good thing, but I'm not working out like I should, not working out like I used to. Personal note, today I'm totally feeling it. Very meaningful opportunity yesterday. I completed my first Spartan run since the COVID-19 pandemic. And this one I did with a group of old friends and acquaintances from back in college. And it was nice and local too. I got to run the stadium at the beautiful University of Notre Dame. But when I say run the stadium, I'm this wasn't a flat opportunity. I was up and down the stairs, climbing walls, doing adult monkey bars. Oh my goodness, do I feel it today. I am sore in ways that I haven't been sore before. I'm walking like I'm a 95-year-old man. That's why you get to see me sitting here if you're watching the YouTube, and I'm not going to move. That's my fault. That's because I didn't prioritize working out in that way in the past 6 months, especially the past 2. And I really felt like, no, I'm just going to go do it. And so I'm paying for it. I know for me personally, I can't help other people be healthy if I'm not healthy myself. And I need to find ways to bring that back into balance and prioritize physical health, whether it's running or cycling or lifting weights. I think we all know many of us lead sedentary lifestyle, sedentary jobs. My job certainly sitting in my office chair for an hour at a time here and there. Like, I need to make sure I focus on physical activity to stay healthy and to be able to help others. My excuse was, well, I'm just so busy with work, and that's garbage, right? For me, sorry, not accusing you of that, but for me, that was a garbage excuse. So once the podcast returns and I've taken these next few weeks to reassess and to do some other things, I'm committed to making that change, to making time. And I would encourage you to have that attitude. If the words "I don't have time" come out of your from your mind, out of your mouth, you really have to step back and reconsider that, because we make time for what is important to us. And I'll be honest, the past 6 months, being at work helping people has been very important. And I traded that for my health. Okay, now it's time to do something else. What is it that you have claimed in the past 6 months that you haven't had time for, and that you're going to turn around and do differently for the second half of the year? This has been a big one. This next one, wait until I retire, has been a big one as I've studied the current career trends to be able to help people with that, to do some consultation. I think I've talked about this in different ways, that there was this attitude from, specifically it was the baby boomers, to go put in 30 or 40 or even 50 years of hard work, and to wait, like, I can't wait to travel. That was always a big one. I can't wait to travel when I retire. I can't wait to go do this when I retire, when I have more time. And you know this, it's like, don't have time. You have to live while you're here. You have to live while you have the opportunity, because maybe you won't have it. But most importantly, that's the richness of life, doing these things, living, right? Having the time. I think this weekend's a great example. I could have said no to that Spartan. I could have said no to my daughter. I don't want you to have your friends over. And I really didn't. Don't tell her. All these things, we could wait until a different time. But it's important, I think, to live life today. So for you, what is it you want to do? Again, in the next 6 months, the last half of this year, in the next year, in the next 5 years, what have you been putting off to accomplish? Maybe it's not travel. Maybe it's writing the next great novel. Maybe it's actually taking the time to chronicle your family history. It can be anything, but don't wait. And finally, with that, this is an argument I have from time, not an argument. I had a great clinical discussion with a young man, and I may have told this story already. I've been telling it a bit lately. Young man, good job, makes a decent amount of money, but nothing out of the ordinary, right? He's just I'm not going to tell you, that would break confidentiality, but he's just a good laboring young man and makes a good average salary for what he does. And he said, man, I really want to go to Italy, but I just don't think, he came up with a lot of rationalizations and excuses. I said, all right, let's step back and break that down. What would that look like? And we broke down the money and how many hours he would have to work and how much time it would take after paying his bills. And within minutes, he came to realize, like, he could be doing this in the next year. And it was so beautiful just to see him light up and say, wow, I can make that happen. And I believe right now in our times, I know economic times are hard. I know gas is expensive. It has come down a bit recently, I think, but I truly believe that if there's something we want to do in life, we have the opportunity, what do they call it, to pick up a side hustle, to go do something different, to pick up an extra job. There's plenty of jobs out there that want money so that we can be able to do it. And again, I think that comes down to priorities. If you don't have time and you can't afford it, is it really that you just don't want to do it? And we've come as people to accept these as appropriate excuses. And I would challenge you to challenge yourself. Maybe it's just not that important to you. And if that's it, that's okay. I have to admit, exercise for me in the past, 6 months was not that important to me. The soreness in my body right now, I realize it needs to become more important. If there's something you think you want to do, but you say you can't afford it, do the math. Is it that you can't afford it, or it's just not a priority right now? And that's okay. But the bottom line, and here's where the logotherapy comes in, right? You have to live life today. You have to make meaningful decisions today, or else life is going to become boring or depressing or anxiety-inducing, and you will face that existential vacuum of meaninglessness. And if that's the case, what's the point? Why? You have to find that meaning in your life to be a healthy, fulfilled, meaningful person. So I would challenge you not to use these excuses in your life, that you don't have time, you're going to wait, or you can't afford it. And if you need help with that, go find a good therapist and know that therapy works if you're willing to work within it. And finally, totally off the topic, just don't throw big diagnoses like narcissism and borderline or even bipolar. I know that's one people throw around a lot. You know, when you see somebody have some fluctuations in mood, oh, that person's bipolar. That's a pretty big diagnosis that we take some time to go through, that has some really serious criteria that isn't just you see them being moody. So, find those guides, find those mentors in your life that will help you find the time, find the money to do the things that will give you a meaningful life. So that's what I'm going to be doing. I've got some very meaningful projects coming up, some work-related, some family-related, and some just taking a day to go get on a golf course with my brother-in-law. So give me 4 to 6 weeks. We will be back with a podcast, regular, what do they call it? Monday podcast drops. I think they're drops. In the meantime, check out DanielAFranz.com, DanielAFranz.com. Sign up for that weekly newsletter. I'll still be sending stuff out to you. If you want to connect, you can find out all about me there on the email, at the Facebook, all of those things. And if you're not watching YouTube, hop on over to the Facebook page. You get to take a look at this beautiful ceramic mug that I'm drinking out of this afternoon. As always, it is my pleasure to bring you a little bit of mental health and meaning. I'll miss you for these next few weeks. I hope you miss me too. But if you do, stop on over, sign up for the newsletter, and I will be talking to you soon. Take care.